what may become the most transformative review of Nigeria's 1999 constitution. Since the return to civil rule in 1999, the Senate has unveiled 60 bills on an expansive reform agenda aimed at restructuring governance, deepening democracy, and addressing long-standing national agitations. The bills, ranging from the establishment of state police and local government economy to diaspora voting and electoral reforms, are aimed at reshaping the polity. The National Assembly has been engaged in an endless cycle of constitutional amendments. In the latest round, it is bent on amending the Constitution to make it possible for states and councils to be created, ensure election outcomes are transmitted electronically, grant councils financial autonomy, as well as empower the RMAFC with the ability to carry out its mandate without hindrance. Joining us on this show to discuss how feasible this can be and whether some of these amendments will serve any useful purpose is Kunle Adegoke, a senior advocate of Nigeria. Good morning, Mr. Adegoke, and thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, beautiful people in the house. It's my pleasure to be here this morning.
Thank you. Well, Mr. Adegoke, we've been on this issue of constitution review since the return to democracy in 1999. I recall that as far back as that time, I think it was Professor Ise Sage, he wrote an essay on the 1999 Constitution, where he was asking for over 100 amendments. Well, we have had some amendments over the years. So what we have is 1999 Constitution as amended that we quote. But the Constitution is a living document. But the same Professor Ise Sage, who is an expert, a teacher in constitutional law, says that this latest attempt to amend 60 sections of the Constitution or treat 60 bills is likely to be an exercise in futility. And he talked, as an expert, that in fact the whole idea of a state creation, the plan is to create 40 more states as proposed. He thinks it's wrong-headed. But what do you think? Are there useful aspects of the exercise that you think that the National Assembly should focus upon? Maybe representation of women in politics, maybe diaspora voting, electronic voting, and some of those other ones that look like they are appealing to some people. State police, for example. But what do you think? Do you think Sage is right, Professor Sage, in saying that it will be an exercise in futility? Front page, New Telegraph today.
Thank you very much. Professor Sage is a celebrated constitutional lawyer who taught many people who are reputable lawyers today and has consulted for many institutions and has been in government before. He clearly understands what he is talking about. And to a large extent, Professor Sage has a very valid point with respect to some areas of constitutional amendments being proposed and that are being worked on. A constitution is not only a living document, it is equally a working document. And that is why it is important for it to be critically re-examined at every point of a nation's development. And when more so, there are criticisms against such a document with respect to how much it is serving the interests of the people over whom it was brought into existence, over whom it was enacted into law. And at this stage, I believe that the effort being made by the National Assembly is a salutary one. The only thing is that there are aspects that may not be necessary, that may not be workable. And one of such is with respect to the issue of creation of additional states. A lot of sentiments might be responsible for bringing this as part of the constitutional reform efforts. But a question to ask before we look at, yes, the valid areas, the one fundamental question to ask is how viable would these new states be in the face of the existing states failing the test of viability? And with respect to that, let me now digress to the areas which they ought to concentrate on. When you talk about the autonomy of the judiciary, the autonomy of the local government, the issue of state police, strengthening security in Nigeria, because Nigeria today is still bedeviled by the incubus and succubus of insecurity. And to this extent, people are being killed in different parts of the country and what have you. Yes, the federal government is working on it, but it would be good to have a constitution that can substantially address this issue and can pave way for the ability of the various organs of government to be able to deliver on the security demands of the people. So I believe these are some of the fundamental areas that they need to actually concentrate on. Equally, when you look at the issue of fiscal autonomy, the issue of fiscal federalism, this is one of the areas that I believe that the National Assembly should equally critically examine. How much can we say that the existing states enjoy what can be called the required autonomy in a federation like ours? And we are lucky that we have a judiciary that has given a lot of freedom, the necessary autonomy to the local government, but which implementation has been bedeviled by challenges over the past 1 year. We cannot just rely on the judicial intervention on occasions when it will be necessary, because such matters may not go to the court. And if not for the current Attorney General and the President that allowed the matter to go to the Nigerian Supreme Court for the determination of what level of autonomy the local government should enjoy, definitely today we will still be living in the past. But the implementation requires that there must be a tweak here and there to ensure that the little gain that we have made can be brought into implementation, can be brought into limelight in terms of enforcement. And with the current situation, I believe that these are some of the areas, yes, women participation in politics, because we can see that, yes, demographically, we have more women than men, and educationally today, women are as equally educated to a large extent compared to men. We have many women that have gone to the universities. The current pattern of results from WAEC, from GCE, from the universities, you see women cutting away prizes when men are sleeping. In such a situation, the implication is that we are having more qualified women to hold public offices, to be in politics, and contest elections. Yes, there are areas where they are weakened by the previous prejudices that have become ingrained in the system. These are part of the areas that they need to address so that there could be more inclusivity for women in participation in politics and access to governance. If people like Professor Okonjo, Dr. Okonjo Iweala, I'm sorry, whichever is applicable, Professor, the former NDLEA, Professor, I've forgotten the names, I'm sorry. If people like that had not been given the opportunity to serve, we will not see how much they could deliver. We have many women in the Federal Executive Council today that are delivering, effectively on their mandates. And that is why we need to make sure that the Constitution and the laws that will be implementing the Constitution should be given priority in terms of women inclusivity in governance as well. So there are these fundamental areas, the economic, liberation, that can pave way for the masses to enjoy constitutional
I'd like us to broaden the scope of the conversation to some of the other aspects of this constitutional overhaul, if I may call it that, some of the hot ticket items. Of course, we know that electoral reforms have been a sticking point, especially since the 2023 election, when we saw some previous reforms in action. And the general consensus is that many people were not satisfied with how the law itself translated into something actionable when it came to the actual election itself. Now, to add to that, of course, we're now looking at diaspora voting. We are looking at the potential of independent candidacy. I'd love for you to just give your overall take on what we need to be prioritizing at the moment where electoral reform is concerned. Because as much as people are excited about diaspora voting, independent candidacy and so forth, there are also concerns that, well, so the changes we've made so far are not yet there. Well, what's your take on that?
Yes, I believe that the criticisms against the issue of electoral reforms, the ones that have been brought into existence, the changes that have been brought into existence have not really been effectively implemented. And there are challenges that are making this impossible. For instance, if you look at the issue of counting and declaration of results and what have you, there are challenges bedeviling this particular area that the National Assembly may have to critically examine. If we consider the agitations that went along with the last elections, it behoves the National Assembly to actually look at what is the importance of beavers. What is the effective use of beavers to ensure that results are effectively conducted, counted, and announced? What is the relationship between beavers and the physical documents, and which one should take priority? For instance, when you look at the case of Osun, which eventually paved the way for what was determined in the presidential election, the issue of the effects of use of beavers came into limelight. And while many people were not too satisfied with the consequence of the decision in the Osun gubernatorial election between Governor Adeleke and the former Governor Oyetola, it eventually laid the precedent for what was going to come in the other elections and the presidential election, for instance, where the use of beavers, the effects of use of beavers, and what have you are clearly spelled out, probably in a part of the Constitution, which may now empower INEC to be able to use these documents effectively produced from beavers vis-a-vis the physical document in terms of comparison, determining how many people actually registered to vote, how many people actually did vote, and what is the disparity between the number of voters registered, the number that actually did accreditation and voted. That may create more validity for the electoral results that we are going to be producing. When it comes to issue of maybe diaspora voting, yes, there are infrastructural challenges that we are currently battling. In fact, the infrastructural challenges occasioned a lot of disparity between the number of people who registered, people who were actually cleared for voting in terms of accreditation, and areas where there are no networks and what have you. These are part of the areas that structurally we need to address so that we can remove the dangers of places where there are no networks, and which may render the letters of the law impotent, that they cannot be implemented in the absence of the necessary infrastructural structures that will sustain these things. Because an election is not just a substructure, it is also a superstructure. And the superstructure must effectively have a strong substructure upon which the foundation upon which it is going to rest. Without that, definitely we are still winking in the dark. When you talk about diaspora participation in elections, there are millions of Nigerians. I'm not too sure of the number, but there are millions of Nigerians who reside in various parts of the world today, where there are effective network services that can prop the use of the resort to diaspora voting. And to this extent, we need to strengthen at the level of the Nigerian Communications Commission and other organizations vis-a-vis INEC. We need to strengthen those infrastructures that will make it possible for Nigerians residing abroad to be able to participate in the electoral process. We have too many of them out there who love Nigeria, who want to see changes in Nigeria, who want to see progress in Nigeria, that they are not only, because if they can be sending money home and we can be receiving and be enriching our economy, they should have the right to participate in the determination of who govern them, because they are still coming home. The Yoruba will say, that is, it is the home that you return to after the farm work. I mean, wherever you are all over the world, you definitely will still want to come back one day. And even if you don't want to come back, you have relatives who are there at home and whose responsibilities affect your income one way or the other. So they should be given the opportunity to be able to participate in determining who governs them and their people. So I believe it's high time we worked on this aspect as well, and ensure that organizations like NCC, the Nigerian Communications Commission, are strengthened enough to be able to make adequate provisions. And when it comes to this, you agree with me that the dangers, the problems we had at the level of JAMB, for instance, Joint Matriculation Examination recently, were products of failure of our networks, that some students could not access the question papers online as at the time that they were supposed to do so on the computer. By the time some of them got the questions, it was too late, which are part of the challenges that the network providers are having. And this is why it is important that there must be infrastructural strengthening before we can say we'll go to diaspora voting.
But with due respect, the JAM thing was different. It was a lot of vendor problem. I think that's also the conversation that they had with JAM. But a couple of things I want us to look at. Number one, IREV. There's been clamor that the IREV should be a coalition unit as regards the coalition or against the coalition center. Is there a way we can practically make that, subject to the Constitution and make it a law? Because most of elections are rigged at coalition units. You lose your coalition unit, you are gone. It's not even at the voting place again. That's number one. Independent candidature is another thing. People should be able to come out and say, okay, vote for me independently, rather than the party dichotomy that happens. Another part of all of this is this laborious process of state creation, which a lot of people say is not viable. Another part of it, as regards the electoral process, is the fact that proper electronic voting, end-to-end electronic voting, where you have a proper electronic system that you click on something, it counts the votes and collates it at the same time, and it transfers into a place like the IREV to having proper electronic voting machines. These are some conversations. What would you like to say about that? But briefly, because I hear we need to go, sir. And thanks for your insight.
Yes, when it comes to electronic voting, I think we have an experience at the level of the Nigerian Bar Association. Unfortunately, the system is still bedeviled with challenges, and there are allegations of rigging here and there. The implication is that electronic voting does not automatically guarantee that there will be absence of rigging. And I think up to about 3 or 4 elections now that have been conducted electronically at the level of the Nigerian Bar Association, there are election petitions that succeeded the exercises. And to that extent, I want to believe that aside from having the law that will guarantee that there should be electronic voting, yes, we can borrow from what has been done at the level of the Nigerian Bar Association, but we should not borrow the negatives, because if it is possible to still electronically manipulate the process by which the electronic voting was done, and there are allegations that some people's votes were being added to a particular candidate, while others are not moving ahead at all, showing a consistent pattern of rigging. Definitely there is a danger in this. But at the same time, politicians themselves need to imbibe the spirit of constitutionalism, the spirit of legality that will give effect to this process. Yes, if people can use the Bible and the Quran for negative purposes, then one wonders what particular human creation cannot be used for negative purposes. So while it is good to have a constitution that is brilliantly couched, fantastically, prepared and enacted into law, if the people that will implement them do not share the spirit of the Constitution, definitely we are still going to have a very big problem. So with respect to electronic voting, IREV, and what have you, yes, we can talk about electronic collation, which is supposed to guarantee that, okay, there should be less of human intervention. In all societies where they have succeeded, they allow the system to work. If we have the IREV is allowed today, that, okay, from what you have transmitted from the polling unit goes to the collation center and is allowed to be added according to how it should be done, we wouldn't have any problem with the result. But unfortunately, we have human beings that will not want this to be. And it's so much disheartens me. I'm an election petition lawyer to a very large extent, and my experience in many parts, House of Assembly, House of Reps elections, and many, have been subjects of criticism when it comes to electronic transmission of results. We have a long way to still go. And well, I want the National Assembly to work on the constitutional reform so that we can at least know that, okay, we have a document that if allowed to work, there can be a good result.
Okay, Mr. Adegoke, thank you very much. I would have loved you to comment on local government autonomy, which will require a redefinition of Section 1, Sub 2 of the 1999 Constitution, but we seem to have run out of time. Thank you very much for joining us.